Hare Krishna. Very happy to present episode 2 of our Agents of Change talk show. Today's guest is His Grace Mahatma Prabhu. Mahatma Prabhu has been one of my greatest inspirations, my heroes in life. He's a very senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada with a lot of experience and lot of realizations. So in this particular episode, we discuss a lot of very important topics from living authentically to humility to forgiveness. We have discussed a lot about belief systems, how to create the right kind of beliefs that work for us and not against us. We have discussed how to get knowledge that is in the level of the head to the level of the heart. And we have discussed about japa and how to live a very non-envious life. So this has been a very interesting podcast. I really enjoyed this podcast and learned a lot of things from it. And I'm sure all of you all also will enjoy. Prabhuji has also agreed for another episode of this podcast. Till then, you all can enjoy this particular episode. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So welcome all of you all for the second episode of our podcast, a talk show called Agents of Change. We are very grateful that today we have His Grace Mahatma Prabhu with us.
Hare Krishna.
Mahatma Prabhu is one of my biggest inspirations, biggest heroes in life. Mahatma Prabhu joined ISKCON way back in 1969, a very early disciple of Srila Prabhupada. He's been in this movement for more than 40 years. He served as the temple president in different cities, different centers and temples across the world. He's been leading book distribution. He's an expert singer. He has released a lot of Kirtan albums. And recently he does a lot of workshops on japa, on Kirtan, on forgiveness, on vows, very beautiful workshops. And he writes very beautiful articles, which comes quite often now in the Back to Garden magazines. I've been reading most of Prabhuji's articles. Practically, I've read all your articles. Prabhuji gives his lectures also. He travels around the globe preaching.
Have you read my book, Living the Wisdom of Bhakti?
Yes. I've read your book. So Prabhuji has 3 books. Living the Wisdom of Bhakti. He's written a book called Japa Affirmations. And then Uplift Yourself to Uplift the World. So very amazing, It gives you a different perspective to the process of bhakti altogether, a very practical perspective. So Prabhuji has really been my inspiration and a great hero in my life. So I'm very grateful that I'm actually getting to meet Prabhuji personally. Though this is not personal, it's still online, but still, I'm very grateful to him. Actually, this is one of my dreams come true, to talk to Mahatma Prabhu. So it's a very wonderful way to start the new year with Prabhuji's darshan and association. So Prabhuji, without wasting much time, can you first tell us how you got into Krishna consciousness? How did you meet Srila Prabhupada and any of your interactions with Prabhupada?
Well, usually when I was younger, and people would ask me this question, I would just, explain the circumstances. I was a student, and that's where I met the devotees. And while I was in university, I studied Bhagavad Gita, and then I became convinced. And I didn't have strong material aspirations. And I was looking for the truth, and I was attracted to Bhagavad Gita. So that's the standard explanation externally. But later in my life, when people say, how did you get into Krishna consciousness? As I thought about it more, I thought it didn't start in this life because there were so many circumstances which enabled me to take up bhakti. And in so many ways, my life was just being directed. The events in my life were directing me that way. So I began thinking, well, why did you become a devotee? I think probably because I already was, or I was going in that direction. And we know that it doesn't just start in this life. So I'll tell you something just to illustrate this. This is kind of interesting because it seems like, from my own experience and the experience of others, if one is evolving spiritually and one is meant to take a bhakti, it just events transpire in your life that just make it happen, like that are out of your control. So I had a very interesting experience. I was very interested in understanding why I'm alive, why anything, like why do anything. I'm very inquisitive, and I was dissatisfied, and I felt like if I don't know why I'm alive, what life is for, then how can I do anything and be satisfied with it? And how could I be inspired to do anything if I don't even know why I'm doing it?
This was at what age, Prabhuji?
I was 19,
Okay.
18, 19 at that, just before I became a devotee. So I wasn't reading a lot at that point. I was more athletic at that time. And I read a few magazines here and there and what the texts I had to read for school. But on my own, I wasn't reading books on philosophy. But I would talk more with people, discuss. So this burning need to understand was in my mind. And then I ended up in a bookstore one day. And I had this question, why? But as I said, I never read books. So like I didn't know why I was in the bookstore. But somehow or other, I've been in the bookstore. And somehow or other, of all the books in the bookstore, I chose Bhagavad Gita, which is, very interesting. It's almost like a movie, like you write a script like that. Just, the music gets eerie and he's drawn into the bookstore and he's looking around. And all of a sudden there's a light on Bhagavad Gita and it captures his attention, thousands of books. And so, it's interesting because I didn't really think much about it until I started writing about this event. And then I realized this is an interesting event because what happened afterwards kind of puts it in a broader context of how Krishna was moving me towards him. So it wasn't Prabhupada's Gita, and I didn't have any money with me, so I couldn't buy it. But then, as far as I remember, the next week, a few days after, or a week after, or 10 days after, we were registering for classes. And in those days, you register for classes by walking around the campus and signing up for a class. It wasn't online. And there was a devotee out there registering people for a class, a university class in Bhagavad Gita. So this was like I think probably just a few days after, I think, oh, it's the Bhagavad Gita. And that, when I saw the Bhagavad Gita, I thought I should read this book, even though I didn't know what the Bhagavad Gita was. But Super Soul said, you should read this book. Kind of like, you have questions? Well, they're all answered in this book. That was the message. I didn't understand it, but I got a message. This is the book you should read. Like, sometimes you look at a book or you think, I should read this, or you see a product, I should buy this. So that's how I felt. And then there's a devotee. And he arranged that the Bhagavad Gita could be taught as an accredited course, not just a club, but an accredited course. And they had a center, and the center was like a 10-minute walk from where I lived. Interestingly enough, where I grew up, it was 6 blocks from the first temple in Los Angeles. So when I was in high school, like 16, 17, maybe 17, I would sometimes see devotees, and I would sometimes see them on Harinam, and then I would see them again in my college town. So, to always be seeing them and to be able to take a Bhagavad Gita course that's accredited, it was a philosophy course, so I could just add it to my curriculum, my schedule. This is a philosophy course. I get credit and study Bhagavad Gita. When I reflected on it, I thought, okay, I have these questions. Krishna's making all these arrangements. It was very, very simple. So, when people say, why did you become a devotee? Sometimes I say, how could I not become a devotee? It's like, why did you eat so much prasadam? Because it was so good. So why did you become a devotee? Because it was like, everything was arranged. So, so what happened was, you asked about meeting Prabhupada. So I began, while I was still a student, I began studying Bhagavad Gita because they were teaching it. And twice a week I would go to the temple. And the class, I think, was an hour and a half, and they would teach Bhagavad Gita. And I was also reading it. And in that 10-week period, I read Bhagavad Gita twice, and then twice a week for 10 weeks. So 20 lessons from the devotees. And then sometimes I would go on Sunday. So if we had, let's say, another 10 Sundays, so that was like, what was like 30, 40, 50, in that 10-week period of spent about 50 hours with devotees.
Mm.
So I understood Prabhupada as the author, but I didn't understand the concept of guru, because being raised in America, we don't really understand that. I mean, we understand teacher, but guru is different than just a teacher. There's a relationship, submission, surrender, and I didn't understand that. So I kind of understood it, but not completely. And I think a lot of us as Westerners, when we were learning Krishna consciousness, there's a lot that you, being born in India, already understand that we didn't understand. So it takes us longer to understand certain things. Like if you see a sadhu, oh, he's a sadhu. You bow down. This is what a guru is. We don't have that. So what happened was, when the semester ended, I went back. I'm from Los Angeles. I went back to Los Angeles. My university was about 400 miles away. And then I went to the temple. And the second time I went to the temple, they said, Prabhupada is coming. I had no idea he was coming. No idea at all. So that was the first time I got to see him. So I'd been reading his Bhagavad Gita now for 3 months. And I get to see him. And I'm still like clouded, I still don't understand everything about the culture, who the guru is, but it was an amazingly powerful experience to see him, because the one thing I understood was, on a subtle level, I understood this person is going to end the cycle of birth and death for me. That I understood. It wasn't so conscious, but I understood this person is going to end my material existence. Even as a very young person, not so well versed, I could feel that. And so when I saw Prabhupada, it was a bit overpowering. And there was also, the thing about meeting Prabhupada was he was unlike anyone else. You couldn't compare him to anybody. So what was Prabhupada like? Was he like this person? No. Was he like that person? Not really. Was he like this? You couldn't compare him to anybody because he was transcendental. I had never met anybody like him. Like, everything about him was different. His face, the way he walked, the way he talked, the way he did everything. I'd never seen anybody do it like that. It was like, for me, it was like watching Prabhupada was like watching a movie. And no one ever made me feel the way I felt. I never felt that way. So it was just unique on every level. And I think a lot of us who became devotees, it was because of the philosophy and prasadam and kirtan. But when we met Prabhupada, it was like, oh, this experience I'm having in Krishna consciousness is unique. But now when I see Prabhupada, this is the most unique. There's nobody I've ever met like this. And so why wouldn't I want to take shelter of this person? Why wouldn't I want to follow this person? Because everyone else I followed just led me to a dead end. So something like that.
How many interactions you had with Prabhupada?
I probably went on maybe 2 or 3 morning walks. I think maybe once or twice in his garden, twice in his room, and about 10 letters and about 100 classes that I attended, something like that. But as the movement was developing, it was only really the GBC and sannyasis that had a lot of access.
Correct.
Temple presidents a little bit. I was a temple president for a while. So at that time, we would write a letter every month. So for a year and a half, I wrote a letter every month. And he would always write back. So that was my biggest personal contact, was through the personal letters I wrote as president. And then I would ask questions. And for us, it was very exciting. because it was like I was saying, I don't know if I was articulating it, but when I read Bhagavad Gita, it was like, this is what I'm looking for. And so Prabhupada Bhagavad Gita, the whole process was, wow, I found it. This is amazing. So everything every day was just amazing because we were going deeper into the thing we wanted that we could never find. And we actually found it. And there were so few devotees at that time that it made it seem more valuable and more rare because there were only a few hundred people doing it in the world. Maybe when I joined, maximum 500, part of ISKCON.
Truly, what was the mood during those days? I think
The
you
mood,
also were had a desire to become a sannyasi. Was that the mood?
well, one of the challenges we had is that we had a very young movement. Well, there's a couple challenges. We had a young movement. So, now you have a history of ISKCON, 50 plus years, 55 years or whatever. And so we can learn so much. And so, now, if someone wants to be a brahmachari for their life, we have experience. Well, certain percentage make it. This is why they make it. A certain percentage will not make it. This is why they didn't make it. In those days, there was no statistics, so to speak. There was no history. So most of the movement was brahmachari. Most people were coming single, and that was being emphasized. And so that's what we were trying to do. And then Prabhupada started giving sannyas. So it just seemed like, well, if you don't want to get married, then the next, why don't you take sannyas? But, we're all very young. And it's true, Prabhupada did give sannyas to some young men, and it's true that not all of them could do it. But it just seemed like for many of us, and for me, like, well, if you want to surrender, why not just become a sannyasi? Because then you're giving up everything. But we didn't have the maturity to know whether or not we were qualified. It seemed that Prabhupada understood us better than we understood ourselves. So some men, very young, he gave it to because he felt that they could do it. But I wanted to do it. But he wouldn't let me do it. He didn't think I was qualified. And in reflecting, what I realized is that a lot of times when we understand something is good, we want to do it because intellectually we say this is right. But it doesn't mean just because we want to, we actually can do it. And so there was this disconnect between what I want to do and what I can do, right? So, you read something, surrender to Krishna. Okay, this sounds great. Give up everything. This sounds great. This is what it's all about. But can I do that right now? What are the steps to get there? That we didn't really, we just thought, yeah, I can do it. Why not? What else would I want to do? And I think part of it was we had just come out of material life. So we're thinking, well, I don't want to go back to that. That was horrible. But we couldn't envision a life, ahead of us of the challenges and the desires that would again come up because we had just renounced everything, frustrated. We could still feel the burn on our hand. It's like, no, I'm not going to get near the fire. But when the burn healed, then we kind of started to see who we really were. Not just a reaction to the pain of material life, but who we were and what we need. So there was no 50-year devotees, 50 years in the movement to say, no, Mahatma, you shouldn't do this. You're not ready for this. We didn't have that. So we were just thinking, no, I can do it. And fortunately, Prabhupada could understand that it was premature for me, so he wouldn't give it to me. And I was married at that time, and Prabhupada saw that it was irresponsible. So he told me, he said, you're being irresponsible. And how can I give sannyas to someone who's irresponsible? That you're going to, my son was 1 year old. So, and that was like 19, I think I was 23 and my son was a year old, something like that. So, why would Prabhupada say, yeah, leave your wife with nothing, no money, and just take sannyas? So, we didn't have the maturity to think like that. We just thought, be great, surrender, just do it. So that was hard. We made a lot of mistakes because we didn't have those experienced devotees guiding us. And now we have that. And it's so much easier. If you want to make a decision, there's so many people you can talk to who can tell you, okay, this is what to look out for. And this is how to see if you're qualified.
So speaking about this, I think you have a company called Soul Tools. Probably now it is called the Sattva Way, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So you do one course called Managing Your Ego, shifting from falsity to authenticity. So
Yeah.
I mean, connecting back to your life also, what you just spoke, how do you actually live an authentic life, a honest life?
Yeah. Well, in the Gita, Krishna has a phrase, or it's translated into English as the introspective sage. So, of course, like we have the word spectacle, so it means to see, and intro means within. And as I meditated on this statement and just the word introspection, I began to see how essential it is for spiritual practice to be introspective. And introspective means to be objective about yourself. And ego is very subjective. I'm the greatest, I'm the best. Nobody's as smart as I am. Nobody's as qualified as I am. Everything I think is correct. Everyone else is wrong if they don't agree with me. That's the subjectivity of ego. But introspection is objectivity, being able to see, no, that may not be true that I'm the greatest, I'm the most intelligent, that I'm always right. Not that I'm not right sometimes, but obviously not always right. So introspection, perhaps we could say it means self-honesty, being able to admit where I'm weak, maybe being able to admit my faults. Ego doesn't want to do that. Ego is always trying to compete with others. Ego is very insecure. Like we have to, to feel happy, to feel strong, we have to outdo somebody. If we lose, we can't deal with it. The ego just becomes depressed. And if we're in spiritual life, we have to be able to see these things, see ourselves, see our ego, see our desire to be recognized, see our weaknesses as they are, but without judgment, not berating ourselves, but just see them as they are. Be realistic. So I would say it's really a matter of being realistic about ourselves, because like we're talking about this sannyas position, that was unrealistic for me. And it was a lack of self-honesty, not recognizing that I wasn't capable of doing it at that point in my life. And so that's what self-honesty means. And ego is all about what other people think of me. And that's not what spiritual life is about. Spiritual life is we don't do things to impress people. That's material life. And so part of the problem is we come from material life into spiritual life, and a lot of times we bring that material mentality. That material mentality, it actually gets you ahead in the material world. It's common. People often will not think it's bad if you're competing, right? Maybe you step on someone's toes to get a position. Maybe you work really hard and your company outdoes another company, or you win an event, or you start a company and it puts another company out of business, and people will congratulate you for that. So that's very good. You worked hard, you're very smart. So that works materially, but in spiritual life, it doesn't exactly work that way. We're not going to compete with other devotees. We're going to serve them. We're not trying to outdo anyone or anything other than our own weaknesses. We're trying to overcome them. So that becomes the problem. You come to spiritual life and you have this success mentality, material success mentality, which is ego-based. And sometimes that enters spiritual life and it can ruin our spiritual life. spiritual life it's really the essence of it is humility. It's I am of all the people, of everyone, of all the devotees, I am the worst. That's how a pure devotee thinks, inconceivably. Of all my disciples, I am their servant. They are my gurus. And it's hard for us to conceptualize how someone could think like that, isn't it?
Right.
The guru is thinking his disciples are teaching him. They're actually his guru. I don't have disciples. Oh yeah, Bhaktisiddhanta was told, don't make disciples. And of course, you know that he had disciples. So it seems that he disobeyed that order. And he explained, he said, actually, I don't have any disciples. They're all my gurus. And I'm learning from them how to serve my guru by watching them serve me. Thinking that I'm their guru. I'm watching them. I'm learning and I'm serving them. So I don't have any disciples. He once said, how many disciples do you have? He said, 4, 2 arms and 2 legs. They serve me. They are my servants. But other than that, I'm the servant of these other people you call disciples. I'm their servant. So that's Krishna consciousness. And I think it's important to know that that's the goal. Because when we have this material mentality, we think, well, maybe the goal is to have a position, have some recognition in the organization. Because that's, you know, in India, right? If you've gone to a good school, like if you're from IIT or some other good school, people will highly respect you. If you work for a good company, you'll be highly respected, isn't it?
Right.
And that becomes very important for people because people are judging you by your education, by your job, company you work for, by the position in the company. So it becomes very important for everybody because that's how people are looking at us, how we're dressed, what car we drive, where do we live, what family we're from. And so what caste, you know, it's like, it's pervasive, right? How we're being judged. And then you become a devotee and you could be thinking, oh, now that I'm a devotee, so position is important. Maybe I should become this. Temple leader, project leader, president, Sankirtan leader, whatever. And that's not what it's about. So sometimes it takes a while for us to understand. No, it's about, I'm not a Naham Vipra, I'm not a Brahmin, I'm not a sannyasi, I'm just a servant. And humility is the ultimate goal. This is like Bhaktisiddhanta. When he was leaving this world, he said, our goal is to be a particle of dust at the feet of Rupa and Raghunath. Now meditate on that. Our goal is to be a particle of dust. Yeah. So I say, what's your goal? Well, I was thinking I could become GBC in 10 years. Why? Well, if I become GBC, then, you know, I'll get respected. Well, you know, I'll get the Mahaprasadam whenever I want it. And when I go to Mayapur, people will look at me, you know, in a good light because I'm GBC and I, you know, I'll become more confident and proud. And no, that's all the wrong reasons, right? The goal, as long as you're in that mentality, my goal is to be a particle of dust. Then you've got it. Then you've arrived. So I really see sometimes devotees have a hard time admitting. You know, let's say you were thinking like that. Let's say Achyut Gopal, you know, you were thinking, I want a position because I'll be respected. But it would really be hard for you to admit that to yourself, that that's why you want to become, you know, it's like, I want to become this in my temple because I want a position. You will tell yourself, no, I just want to do it to serve. And I wouldn't deny that you want to do it to serve, but there also may be something else in there, right? And to be able to acknowledge that and admit it, that's what it means to be introspective. That's what it means to be humble. And if we don't acknowledge it and admit it, how can you heal it? Because you don't even know it's a problem. How can you cure a disease if you don't even know you have it? So that, I think, is a huge challenge because the ego gets in the way because the ego doesn't want to admit it, that that's actually my motive. But I do a course on humility and we really look at motives. And when devotees start looking at their motives, they realize how much their motives are mixed. Even when they thought they were pure, they start to realize, no, there's mixed. It's not It can't be that pure until I'm more pure. And once you become more self-objective or self-honest, then you can assess them and assess them without judging. Okay, I have this motive. I'm not going to condemn myself. I'm just going to recognize I have a ways to go. And I think a lot of the problem is devotees are reluctant to judge themselves because they get quite discouraged when they see their faults. And so the way to do that is don't judge yourself. Just become aware of what you need to work on, but without judgment, without condemnation. Because if you condemn yourself, it doesn't work. And if you have that mentality, you don't want to discover what's wrong with you because it just discourages you. Rather than the mentality of discovering what's wrong to improve it, which is kind of inspiring. Did that answer your question, or did that answer like 5 questions? Or?
Yeah, it answered the question, and there are many more things. Actually, I wanted to ask you. You touched all those points also. Yeah, it's very true. Actually, even I feel that when we come in the process of Krishna consciousness, we come very genuine, purely to serve Krishna. But down the line, the ego creeps in, and the motives change. The motives is not purely service to Krishna, there is agendas that come,
We didn't realize how bad we were.
Yeah.
You realize that later. The motives were there, but we just didn't. Yeah. We were trying to be honest and pure.
Yeah, I think what you said is very important, Rohit. Taking time to time, introspecting and finding out, whether our motives are correct or wrong. But you had given a lot of series on beliefs.
Yes.
I heard almost the entire series. It was quite interesting. I was intrigued about this topic of belief. And really I found it very useful. All your detailed discussions, even though I had heard it almost like 1.5 or a year ago. Mm-hmm. But can you just, in essence, highlight us what is belief and why it is important for us in the path of bhakti to understand this?
Yeah. Well, in Vedic analysis of the mind, you have a conscious mind and the subconscious, and you have different names, but it's we'll have different Sanskrit names for different aspects, but it's very similar to what modern psychology is saying. And one of the things that happens is as we grow in life, we develop beliefs based on what we're told, based on what we experience, based on, beliefs in the society. It's just like you believe in things. Like American, when they see an Indian believing in so many gods and this 10-headed Ravana and this demigod, they're like, this doesn't make sense to them. But you grew up with that. So for you, it's just normal, So the culture has beliefs. You'll learn beliefs. You'll have experiences, like these kinds of people, when you're a kid, certain kinds of people, maybe they mistreated you. So then you have belief that these people are bad. Or maybe one person from that group mistreated you. But because you're young, you just develop a belief, oh, these people are bad. And
is belief,
the other kind of belief,
is judgment and beliefs almost same?
Judgments can create beliefs, or judgments can be consequence of belief. Okay. I'm making a judgment because of what happened. Today, this person from this caste did something to me. Next week, the person from the same caste did something to me. Now I'm making a judgment on this caste, which develops a belief that people of this caste are like this. So, and then the last way you develop beliefs, which is the way nobody does, is you decide what would be a better belief. And that for us is happening in Krishna consciousness because Prabhupada is really telling us what to believe and what not to believe, like women or mother. That's a belief system, right? And when young boys, it's probably true in India now, admit for many of them, but in the West, young boys are not trained to see women as mother, but they're trained to see women as objects of their enjoyment. So what you're learning is affecting your beliefs. Because when I was young, it's like if you had a lot of girlfriends, that was like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. That's good. You're on the top of the pack now, congratulations. You're like 15 years old and you're being honored because you have new girlfriend every year. So that creates a belief in how you see women, dominate them, enjoy them, and so forth. So I think one of the important things for us to understand is that as we grow and as we experience life and as we learn and as we interact with our culture, we will develop beliefs. And not all those beliefs are helpful for us. Like the belief that the young boys get that women are objects of their enjoyment, that doesn't help them, especially if you're a brahmachari. Definitely you don't want that belief. So a lot of times what's happening is when we're trying to control our thoughts and we find we can't, we keep coming back to the same thoughts, although we're trying to control them, it's because a belief is generating those thoughts. And the beliefs are usually subconscious. We don't know we have them. So there's a lot going on inside of us that we don't even recognize. Like why, you've ever asked yourself a question, why is it that this always happens to me? Like all the time this happens to me. Could be good or it could be bad. Why is it that every time I'm about to finish something, I don't finish it and I start a new project? And just when it's about to become successful, I let it fall apart and start a new one. Like, why is that? That happens to some people. I don't know if it happens to you, but it happens to some people. And so when you see that, you naturally want to ask, why is that happening? It just keeps repeating. And it's because of a belief, like fear, it could be fear of failure. If I take the project to the end, there's a chance it'll fail. Or if I give it up now, I don't have to worry about the fact that it's going to fail. Did the project fail? No, I just stopped it, Or no, if it succeeds, then I'll have to be responsible for it. And so I have this belief about responsibility, that responsibility it's not good or it won't make you happy. So when you see patterns, you can start to understand, oh, I picked up beliefs along the way, and these beliefs are affecting my behavior. And I don't even know I have them. And that's one of the ways to start introspecting about what my beliefs are, by looking at my actions. Why does this always happen? Why does it take me so long to get good at something? Well, maybe you have a belief that it takes long to get good at something. Why don't I ever succeed to the level I want? Maybe you have a belief you're not qualified. And I think the worst thing, at least what I've seen, the worst thing is when you're trying to control your thoughts, but you have beliefs which are diametrically opposed to the way you want to think. So you're trying to control your thoughts, and for a day or two, you're doing well. And then the beliefs come back, the thoughts come back, because they're generated by the beliefs. And if you don't change the beliefs, how will you change the thinking? I have these sexual thoughts. Why? What's your basic view towards women? Well, my belief is women are for man's enjoyment. Yeah. So what about women as mother? You think that would help you control your thoughts? Yeah. So now you have to imbibe a new belief, woman as mother. And all of a sudden they're respected. You don't see them as objects of sense gratification. And so naturally the right thoughts come as a process of the belief. But when you have the wrong belief, the wrong thoughts come. And if you're trying to control thoughts and you just can't seem to control it for more than a day or two, or here, well, when I was in Vrindavan, everything was good. But when I went back to Goa, then I started thinking the same way. That's because those beliefs are there. They're generating the thoughts. And temporarily you transcended them. You're in the Dham and, with 1,000 other devotees or 10,000. Yeah, naturally, you're not thinking about those things. But when you get back into your environment, then the beliefs are generating the thoughts. So I think that's one of the most important things to be aware of, because sometimes we're trying to control our mind and we can't control it because we have we have thoughts. Another example would be low self-esteem. I just saw a coaching session in which a young girl was explaining that her father was a surgeon and he was very busy. And she always felt he never had any time for her. And she said she remembered once when he was going to work, she grabbed onto his leg and said, "Please don't go." And the only way he could go is he kind of just had to pull her arms off him, like unpeel her. She was like glued to him. And so how does that make her feel, right? It makes her feel like unwanted by her father, right? So she's going to grow up with this kind of feeling that I'm unwanted, right? And it's going to generate so many doubts in herself, lack of self-esteem and so forth. And until she replaces that belief, it's always going to be a problem, and it's going to come up, and she'll have a lot of bad relationships with people because she'll feel rejected by them and so many things. And then we'll preach to that person, but unless that preaching is going to change their beliefs, often the preaching will just be temporary because fundamentally their thinking, their beliefs are causing them to look at the world in a certain way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. So Prabhuji, you were
everyone who's listening to it now is thinking, okay, how do I change my beliefs? That's another class. Or you can listen.
Exactly.
You can listen to SoundCloud to the course.
That was supposed to be my question.
Yeah, that requires listening. But one of the things I learned that was so interesting is that most of us, because we don't even know what the beliefs are, we're not aware of it. We live our life being, run by this conditioning. And hopefully, as you become a devotee, you're getting reconditioned with better beliefs. But sometimes the new beliefs that Prabhupada is trying to give us are sitting on top of old beliefs. And so the old beliefs, because they're programmed in our subconscious, are dominating. And the new beliefs are kind of coming and going. So, the first stage is we have to become aware of what the beliefs are by looking at the action, or what am I doing? And then asking myself, I'm doing this, or I'm thinking this. What must be my beliefs if I'm thinking this way? If I always feel like, oh, the devotees don't like me and they're always giving service to others and I'm always in the worst position. And why am I thinking that way? There must be some belief which is causing my perception. So generally, what I would do in helping a devotee is help them become aware of the belief and then ask them, according to what you want to achieve in your life, what would be a better belief? What would be a belief that's aligned with what it is you want? And this is really nice. Okay, so you're a brahmachari. You say, well, if you're a brahmachari and you're having trouble controlling yourself, what would be a better belief? Oh, the women are mother. I think naturally that's what we would just think. So there are many ways you can adopt new beliefs, but the first thing is to understand that what's happening is beliefs were thrown upon you unknown to you from a very early time in your childhood. And then later in life, due to experiences and social programming and what you read. And so at a certain point in life, you have to look at what are my beliefs and what are my goals? And then you'll start to see, I have lots of beliefs that are completely against my goals or in some way out of alignment for my goals. So then I start thinking, okay, if these are my goals, what would be the beliefs that would support it? And there are many ways to adopt a belief, but one of the easiest I find is start living that way. So if we're using the example, women as mother, so then you think, oh, okay, if women are mother, how would I deal with them? How would I treat them? How would I think about them? And you start practicing that, right? So everything's very respectful. I would respect them, I would serve them, I would protect them, because that's how I would deal with my mother. I have this formula, RPS, or RSP, respect, serve, protect. That's so if I start acting in that new way, it starts to reprogram, because now my actions are working on my subconscious. And so it's creating a new reality. And it can take time, but first is awareness that this is the new belief I want, that women are mother or women are to be respected or whatever, or it could be authority. I have trouble with authority. So what would be a belief that I might be having? You know, authority is exploitative. Why? Because my father used to hit me and punish me for no reason. And, you know, when I turned 16, I just wanted to run away from home. I hate people telling me what to do. So now I have a guru, I have a temple authority. To feel that way is going to be destructive. So how should I be thinking? What do I want to think? How do I want to see it? I want to see authority as someone who cares for me, who's loving, kind. And then I want to interact with that way. I want to interact with that realization. I want to be able to experience that from them and have trust and faith in them. So the thing is that I discovered maybe 20 years ago. I'm always discovering it, but the reality is there's a world inside of us of a lot of stuff inside of us we're not even aware of, and it's playing out, and that's why it becomes sometimes difficult to make changes, and we don't know why, because something inside is playing out we're not aware of, and we haven't changed it. So that's kind of a summary. But then those classes, I believe, are on my SoundCloud. Correct. So if any of you are interested in this topic, it's very interesting. It's very powerful.
Yeah. I think it also, one thing that when we are forming new beliefs by reading Srila Prabhupada books and everything, but then when we still keep holding on, or our attachments are there to the material things, the material style of success. You know, if you keep watching wrong things, then those beliefs keep reinforcing the negative ones.
Exactly, exactly. And Prabhupada is instilling so many new beliefs, but if you don't practice them, then you never adapt to them in their life. That's the third process in the Vedic system of education. First, you understand, you assimilate, and then you apply it. And it's only in the application that you actually things change. Because on the intellectual level, it's just potential. It's like you know what to do. But until you do it, it doesn't really make much difference. So I think that's where a lot of devotees run into problems. When you intellectualize something, you think you understand it. But you have to distinguish that's intellectualizing is, yes, you do understand it intellectually, but practically it doesn't mean that you've understood it. Because if you practically understand something, then how do we know that? We know that by how you're living. You know, so it's like if you're overeating and I say, well, Prabhu, that's not good for you. And you say, yeah, I know. So great. You know, yeah, I heard the class today that talked about overeating. Yeah, I understand it's bad for me. Then why are you overeating? Because I like to. So understanding it's only potential. You know, you may not act on it. So like you say, if we don't, then really we're just acting on the old conditioning. So it's really important when you're sitting in a class, if you're really going to benefit from it, you have to act on it. Otherwise, you don't really assimilate. You don't really get the realization. It doesn't stay with you.
So I think, you wrote an article from head to the heart.
Yes.
So how does this, I mean, you already spoke about it, but then in few words, how does our theoretical realization that we are reading from Prabhupada books, how does it actually become a realization on the level of the heart, that conviction?
I think one of the biggest problems.
Yeah, you mentioned about introspection. I'm sure that helps.
Yeah. From my experience, one of the biggest problems is just to know the reality of what you just described. Because so often we think we're actually living something, living the philosophy in some way, when we're not. And so that's a huge obstacle, just to become aware. I'm sure you've seen this in yourself, you've seen it in others, where we're doing something wrong, and we'll correct that person, and they'll say, no, I don't do that. And we see clearly that they do it, and they don't realize they're doing it. And the reason is, when you think you're doing something, you don't always become aware when you're not, because it's just the way the mind works, you know? It's kind of like singing out of tune. If you don't realize you're singing out of tune and you think you are, no one can tell you you're not, because you're not, you don't have awareness of it. So that's really a big issue, what I've seen, just bringing awareness. And part of the problem is, which makes it difficult, is that we read in our books about a devotee. A devotee is this, a devotee is that. And we're all called devotees. So we think, well, I'm a devotee. So, you know, I'm not like the karmis. I'm not like the non-devotees. They do all these things, but I'm a devotee. And if you've been a devotee long enough, you know that's not true. That just because you're a devotee and the books talk about devotees are like this and non-devotees are like that, it doesn't mean you don't do what the non-devotees do sometimes, or all the time, at least in certain aspects. And so part of the obstacle for us is we think, well, I'm a devotee, so I'm on the devotee side, so I'm not on that side. And in fact, I'm acting sometimes on that side, but because I think I'm on this side, I don't notice it. And I say, oh, they do that, I don't do that. When in fact, sometimes I do it also. So that's the first obstacle, is just recognizing what the problem is, recognizing or justifying it. Well, I'm a devotee, I can justify it. I didn't treat you well. Well, I'm older than you, so I have a right to do it. But in fact, I don't have a right to do it. You didn't deserve my anger. That was my fault, but I blame it on you. Well, you're just a younger devotee, so it's my prerogative. So sometimes we do that, you know, we take entitlement due to position, and then we make excuses for misbehavior. So we're not honest enough to recognize. Goes back to that other point. So first you have to realize it's not in your heart in the first place. And that's a big problem, because a lot of times we think it is, and we rationalize and justify. I'm a devotee, so how could it not be? So, you know, look at your life. Look at your life as if your life were on a movie screen, and watch it. And then you take some objectivity and you realize, yeah, there's a lot of things that are not perfect yet. There's a lot of things that resemble somewhat the activities of non-devotees. A lot of things sometimes, maybe not a lot, but some things that are maybe in some cases worse than what the average person does. The average person sometimes would be kinder than I am sometimes. That's hard to admit, isn't it? Because I'm a devotee, how could that be? But they've done research and they find that secular people tend to be more compassionate than religious people. Isn't that interesting? Is it, you know, a small percentage of religious people are more compassionate, but about 80% of them are not. They're self-righteous and condemning and judgmental, more than secular people. So, you know, there are liabilities in taking up spiritual life, and this is one of the liabilities. It's pride, and it's thinking that I'm better because I have a spiritual practice. So I think also what we can say is perhaps devotees need to realize more that their knowledge is insufficient until it's practiced. So as part of the learning process, not just intellectualizing and assimilating, okay, I understand what it means, I understand how it is applied, but really focusing on the last aspect. How do I get this into my life 24/7? I just gave a class about it last night. And one of the things that I find is problematic is that Krishna is giving us opportunities at every moment to live his teachings, but we don't always recognize it. We don't always see how that's happening. And then we go justifying mistakes, justifying behavior, which is not proper, instead of looking and saying, oh, what I just did, that means I don't understand what I heard in class this morning. And I was joking with the devotees. I said, you ever hear a class about cooperation and an hour later you find two devotees fighting who were in the class? So that, that's an example of it's like, okay, I understand in my head. But my personal realization is, if you're going to actually understand what you're learning, there has to be some shift in consciousness. That's where the change takes place. Okay, cooperation. Okay, so if I've understood cooperation, it means, well, I have to respect others. There may be some compromise necessary, and all the other aspects of what it takes to work well with other people. Has that shift gone in my consciousness? Because if it doesn't, what I'm learning is not shifting my consciousness, how will I practice it? It's not in the heart yet, because the heart means the perception, how I see things. And if that class is not changing my perception, how will I be able to act on it? Because if I have my old perception, I'll act in the old way. It's only the new perception that I live with that's causing me to act differently. Just let's say I'm critical of you. Maybe I think you're smarter than me, so I criticize you to pull you down. And then I go to a class and it talks about respect, it talks about honor, appreciation, service. And I really get it and I really understand. And all of a sudden I start seeing you in a different light. I see all the good things you're doing. I don't see the bad. So now I stop criticizing you because I've changed consciousness. But if I keep it in my head, just understanding it's wrong to criticize, what's going to happen? Still, I want to pull you down because I'm still jealous of you or envious or whatever. And so unless I'm shifting, working on that new vision, it's a heart, you could say heart, consciousness in the heart, not just thinking. Change. So that's the head to the heart process. And if we don't get there through what we're learning, then we aren't taking full advantage of what we're learning.
Right. Though you were speaking about the point of cooperation.
Yes.
So many times it happens that we compromise. Like cooperation ultimately happens by one side that has to compromise. One side has to take that humble position. Then only the relationship continues. But many times it happens that you keep doing that part, and when you see that there is no reciprocation from the other side, and that your higher spiritual self expects that you keep compromising, you keep going on. But then sometimes that ego comes up, is saying that, so ultimately for cooperation to happen, your ego has to go down and your higher self has to become victorious. But many times we feel that, sometimes this ego comes up and says that, why every time, sometimes even I have to win. Why every time I have to be the loser? And then there is a fight. You can see that ego coming up, but then you feel that, sometimes I have to give in to this ego also, So how do you always keep feeding the higher self and putting that ego down?
There's a couple ways you could look at it. I can give one panacea answer to start with. And what you're describing is a situation where it feels kind of like impossible to act in a certain way or consistently act in a certain way, when maybe we feel it's unfair or it's just wrong what the other person is doing or saying, but we're obliged to cooperate, and it's just on an emotional level, it seems impossible. In those situations, one thing that can be helpful is we think cooperation is very important for Prabhupada, and I can please him if I cooperate, even though it's hard, even though even natural, maybe not to want to cooperate, because we see that what we're cooperating with is perhaps not the best solution or even the wrong solution. But sometimes we don't have a choice. There's no option. And we have to think, okay, what would Prabhupada want? And, and sometimes just saying, okay, I'll go along with it. even though I don't believe in it, is we'll please Prabhupada. And if we can please Prabhupada, then we're good. Everything is good. Now, sometimes we have the opposite, I've seen, and probably you've seen as well, that we don't want to go along because we know it's wrong. And like you say, then the ego comes up, and then the behavior with which we deal with other devotees in order to resolve this issue starts to descend in the mode of passion and ignorance. And so in the name of establishing what's right or siddhanta, we start to fall into this very uncultured behavior. And in often cases, it creates more of a problem than the problem itself we're dealing with, right? And then there's attacking, there's fault finding, there's offenses. So the other part of the answer is we don't want to allow a situation which we don't agree with to cause us to descend into the lower modes of nature and then behave not as a devotee should. So it's something we have to remember. In dealing with this situation, I have to maintain a sattvic attitude and actions. I have to follow Vaishnava etiquette. And it's so easy not to. Just put forward my case very strongly, let people know they're not very smart and I am. And if we don't do this, everything is going to go to hell and you'll all be responsible. It's easy to do that. And it's hard to be sattvic. So I think that's the challenge also, because we're also trying to create a culture. So it's not just about what's right in terms of this particular issue, but it's also about what's right in terms of the culture that we're trying to create. Because by our actions, we're creating a culture, and that culture will be inherited by future generations. And if we create a very rajasic, tamasic culture, stand up for what's right. Yeah, stand up, but stand up in the sattva guna. And if the movement's not ready for it, wait. Maybe they'll be ready for it in 5 years. Sometimes it's like that. You know you're right, but nobody understands it. And 10 years later, they understand it. 20 years, could be 30 years later. Usually, I haven't seen anything that's right in ISKCON go for more than 30 years without getting recognized. But sometimes it takes 30. You may not be alive when it gets recognized, but I've seen that. A lot of things like were just not appreciated for about 30 years. So my fear, my biggest fear, I feel that if we maintain etiquette and we maintain this sattvic mood, that will be the best platform to ultimately solve problems. And over time, if we're in that mood, if you're actually right and they're wrong, they'll come to see that. Because now we've created a sattvic culture. But if it's a rajasic, tamasic culture, then we're just going to fight. And it's going to degrade into this kind of fighting where it's all about who wins, not about what's the best. As long as I win, I'm happy. Because whatever I think is right, whatever you think isn't. Because I joined one day before you. And, with that kind of thinking, how do we make any progress? So it's not just about this one issue. It's about a whole culture we're trying to create in how we deal with issues, all issues. So that's my concern.
Thank you very much. It was very enlightening.
And that nature that I'm right, you're wrong, well, everybody, that's just material nature. We all feel that way. And Prabhupada wanted us to get along. And so if I can be an agent for cooperation and getting along, that's a great service. Even if I have to step back and say, okay, for now, I just won't say anything, even though I think it's wrong. And with confidence that gradually, because devotees are smart and sincere, the truth will pervade. It just may take 30 years or whatever, 10 years or 50 years, who knows.
Yeah. There's one of your quote, a similar quote, when there is a lack of etiquette, then our conditioning tends to take over us and we think we have the right to criticize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is such a big problem that I think I have the right to blank. And if that blank is something which is not Krishna conscious, that statement doesn't make any sense. I have a right to, it would be like saying I have a right to break the regulative principles. And everyone would say, well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You have no right to do that. But now I'm saying I have a right to criticize, or I have a right to do this because of nothing should justify an action which isn't Krishna conscious. That doesn't make any sense. But that's how the mind works. Sometimes we think like that. I'm justified in becoming angry at you because you don't understand the philosophy. All right, well, help me understand it then, you know. Yeah, it's a big illusion, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So, Prabhuji, can you also tell us how, discussing about beliefs, how beliefs affect japa? You do a lot of workshops on chanting also.
Yeah. Well, I had a very powerful experience once. At the end of a japa retreat, everyone's going back out from this ideal environment that we're in. In America, we would go up in the mountains to retreat centers. So we were, 50 devotees together for 5 days. It was amazing, right? And so on the last day of one retreat, I had this feeling that probably a lot of devotees here have doubts that they're going to be able to keep up the level of japa that they had during this retreat. And I would ask them, I said, how many of you have fears that when you go back into your life, your japa is kind of going to become the way it was before you came to the retreat? And a fair number of devotees would raise their hand. And so I had been studying about beliefs at that time, and I had become very clear that the beliefs kind of are the agents from which we make goals, because you're not going to make a goal if you don't believe you can do it. It's just, it doesn't work that way. You have to have some belief. So I was really concerned that devotees were leaving the workshop with a belief that whatever they learned is going to be difficult to apply. And then I also discovered, which you may have discovered as well, that a lot of devotees do not believe they're going to be Krishna conscious in this life. And so I don't think I'll be Krishna conscious this life. I don't think I'm going back to God in this life, maybe another life. So I was seeing within our movement, there's some disempowering beliefs going around that are quite common. And maybe it's realistic, maybe it's in the name of humility. But I was concerned about it, understanding how beliefs work. And so if you're trying to go somewhere, you're not going to go beyond that because that's your goal. So I started to see how devotees' goals were often connected to beliefs of what they could achieve. And it was kind of what they could achieve based on their own ability, not what is possible transcendentally. And so I was really concerned that if you leave this workshop with the belief that it's going to go back to the way it was, you've already defeated yourself before you even got home yet. And so I would work on helping them understand something about beliefs and showing them that a lot of your belief about what you can achieve and a lot of what you achieve in japa is connected to your belief. And to not go back thinking this is what's going to happen unless what you're thinking this is going to happen is something good, because that is going to help you achieve what's good. And then we had this other little interesting discussion about everyone knows how when you chant in the afternoon, your rounds aren't good. Your rounds are good in the morning, but in the afternoon, they're not good. Or the evening, late at night before I go to bed and I'm tired, they're not going to be as good as they are at 4 in the morning or 3 or 2 or whatever, which is generally true, but that's also a belief. It's a belief based on experience, because every time I chant my rounds in the afternoon, they're not good. Every time I chant them in the morning, they're much better. So now I have this belief that rounds in the afternoon are not good. So every time I have to finish my rounds, and maybe in Goa, you go to the beach and take a walk, they're always bad because that's what I expect, because that's my belief. So because I had done a lot of work on beliefs, I could transcend that, or I could work through that. And so I wouldn't allow myself, if I have rounds left. Right now in COVID, I go out for a walk every day, like 4 or 5, and finish my rounds because I need to walk to get some exercise. So I don't go out thinking, well, it's 5 o'clock, it's the afternoon, it's going to be bad. I just go out thinking let's make them good. Why not? And so I started asking devotees. I said, so what are your rounds like outside the morning? They're not very good. Everybody knows they're not going to be good. They're bad. And so we would, I would let them talk about that. And then I would say, okay, has anyone here ever chanted some really good rounds like at 10 o'clock at night? And a few people would say, some of my best rounds were at 10 o'clock at night. Anyone ever chanted good rounds at 3 in the afternoon? Some of my best rounds were, okay, I'm breaking your conception, because until you break that conception, you are automatically, the way beliefs work is you automatically do what your beliefs tell you, because your beliefs have to sync or align with reality. That's the way they work, right? So if you chant good rounds at 3 in the afternoon, it doesn't sync with your belief that you can't. So automatically, subconsciously, you'll actually cause yourself to chant bad rounds to sync with that belief, which is crazy, isn't it? But it's a reality, and it's good to know that. So once you know that, then you can say, okay, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We're gonna chant, or we can chant excellent rounds now. We can do it. I have to shift my belief. And then you'll find it. You might say, well, could I actually chant as good as the rounds at 3 in the morning? I can't say that for sure, but what I can say, you definitely can chant good rounds if you reframe your belief. So again, it goes back to this idea that beliefs come from experience. And especially if I have the experience that 3 rounds at 3 in the afternoon are bad, you have the experience. All the devotees in Goa have the experience. All the devotees in Alachua, everyone's saying, yeah, 3 o'clock, oh, those rounds are so bad. And we trace it back, we put on our Sherlock Holmes hat, and we trace it back to, it said, well, chanting your rounds in the morning, the best time to chant your rounds is Brahma Muhurta hour, which translates it that every other time your rounds will be bad. Although it doesn't say that. That became the belief, the accepted mass consciousness belief in ISKCON. And so you just inherited as a new bhakta, and all your rounds in the afternoon, if you're a pujari or whatever, they're just going to be bad, because that's how it is. So it's kind of interesting, isn't it? To see that whole process work. And so, when I studied beliefs and I did work on myself, then I started seeing all kinds of beliefs. This is not just with japa. There's all kinds of beliefs in ISKCON going around. If you do this, it's bad. And if you do this, it's good. And so once you understand the process of beliefs, then you have more control, because then you can think, well, wouldn't it be better to believe that I can chant good rounds any time of the day? Wouldn't that help? And you think, yeah, it would. And so you adopt that belief. Well, let's put that belief hat on and let's see what happens. And when you put it on, you realize, yeah, I did chant some pretty good rounds at 3 in the afternoon because I changed my belief about it. Otherwise, it's like I'm destined to chant bad rounds before I even put my hand in my bead bag. Isn't it? Or, this grihastha life is hell. All right, so if you ever get married, you're ready for hell. Grihastha life is a failure. So as soon as you leave the brahmacharya ashram, you spend the rest of your life in depression. I failed my guru. I failed my process. So we have to be aware of these things. And I don't know if this is true today very much, but I know in my generation, at least my experience, the grihastha life was so difficult because we saw it as just Maya. And everything about it was Maya, and in your grihastha life, it's bad, it's a dark well, etc., etc. So with those kind of beliefs, we were like doomed to fail right from the get-go, even if we were compatible. It's like, not everyone had those beliefs, but if you had those, it was like, okay, you don't have to bet on this marriage. This marriage will fail because of the beliefs. So, everyone should become aware of that. If you're looking at your life and wondering why it is the way I don't want it to be, maybe you have a belief that's still acting on you and you're not aware of it. And then you go backwards and say, well, what must I be believing if, this marriage is horrible, but we actually like one another? What must I be believing? And you go back. All those things I heard in those brahmachari classes for years about how bad grihastha life is. Maybe that's what's going on. And in some cases, it's completely true. It is what's going on. So it's really good to know these things. Isn't it?
Very true.
Yeah.
I mean, you were editing my book, Japa Meditations.
Yes, yes.
I realized that while you were correcting, I realized that probably there were so many wrong beliefs I had. So many things that were getting shattered. And even in today's session, so many things are happening. So many wrong beliefs that are opening up.
Yeah, it's hard to know them because they're not in our conscious, they're in our subconscious, and we only notice what's in the conscious. So you have to, through a process, become aware of your beliefs. As you practice it, you start to become aware more and more.
Very true. And I think your japa affirmations actually are very useful in forming the right kind of beliefs for japa.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Because the affirmations are in the present tense, so you already feel that confidence that you can really do japa well.
Yeah. Well, it's the state of consciousness with which we enter japa has a huge effect, as it does with everything, right? If you're going to give a talk at a college, 1,000 students, you know what to say, but if you're in a bad mood, if you're tired, if you really don't want to do it, it's not going to work well. It's not going to communicate. But if it's a topic that you're really inspired by, this was your old college, you've always wanted to be on stage talking, it's going to be, you're in a different consciousness. So there's a consciousness we need to be in when we chant japa, and a consciousness we need not to be in. And that's what that book is helping us do. And as far as beliefs, beliefs affect everything, and there's it's just a reality that a lot of times we're making things hard for ourselves because we have a consciousness which kind of makes it impossible to succeed in some things. I can't do this. Go on book distribution. I can't do this. Give a lecture. I can't do this. Chant good rounds. I can't do this. Right from the get-go. So this japa affirmations is to put us in the ultimate consciousness. You could have an affirmation for book distribution. You could have it for reading Prabhupada's books. You could have it for grihastha life, for brahmachari life. You could have for anything, just to put you in this optimal consciousness, as you're saying, to override those other beliefs that may be saying, no, you can't do this, which is, I don't know why it's like that, but the mind seems to want to sabotage us all the time. A lot of it's because if you've never done something before, then your mind will say, you can't do this, you've never done it. But there's always a first time. And why not use the mind and say, hey, you can do this. Why not? Let's do it for the first time. Right?
Very true. Even before I had started this podcast, this is my second episode. The first one also, I was absolutely not sure whether I can do it or not, whether I'm good at it or not.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Completely doubtful. But then I said that if I don't try it, I'll never find out.
Yeah, exactly.
Prabhuji, one more thing.
If Krishna, yeah. But there's another thing also. In bhakti, the beauty of bhakti is it doesn't matter if we're successful. So that's a different belief. Yeah, the belief is, it's about devotion. It's not about producing results necessarily. Right. So let me try Krishna. If Krishna is pleased by my effort, then that's all that matters. And that makes it easier to do everything.
Very true.
Right?
Yes, very true. Roji, you also give seminars on forgiveness.
Yes.
I think you do like proper workshops where you actually
Yes.
make people release their resentment and anger that they have.
Yes.
I think in your own life also, I read it in one of your articles that some guru or GBC in ISKCON left the movement and you felt very betrayed,
Yes.
and
Yes.
you
Yes.
withdrew in a shell, and it took years for you to actually
Yeah.
forgive and move ahead.
Only 18 years. It was, I came across forgiveness by accident, and then I applied it on this issue. It was a Guru GBC who left. He left, and so the whole zone kind of collapsed, and I was very involved in that zone. I was one of the leaders, and it was kind of like the picture at 9/11 of the building falling down, but we're all holding it up while it's falling on our shoulders. That was the kind of to visualize the emotional experience was like, you just crashed the building and now you're gone and we're holding it up. So I felt betrayed. How could you do that? The person left. He didn't tell us he was leaving. He just left. If we had discussed it, this is my situation, and we discussed what would be best, maybe I would have felt differently, but it was a shock. And it was only 18 years later where it was just kind of an accident. I wasn't even thinking about this issue, but I was in a seminar. It wasn't my seminar, it was another seminar. And so part of the seminar process wasn't a seminar on forgiveness, but part of the process was to forgive somebody. And I thought, I'll forgive him. And once you forgive, then you get objectivity, because otherwise you're in this subjective mode that, I was, in this case, betrayed or mistreated. And once I forgave, it was so interesting for me, because I began thinking, I said, I'm a devotee, right? So, we understand karma, nothing happens by accident. And we're supposed to be kind, compassionate, understanding, etc. And for 18 years, I was upset with this person. I thought, that's really strange. That was a huge revelation for me, because I never really had come to grips with something so paradoxical in my life. Although it was there, I never really recognized it. So then I began doing workshops. I just spent time studying it, using my own experience, studying Prabhupada's books, studying yoga books on forgiveness, psychology books, Christian books, and then began applying it in the courses. And then devotees were coming, the same problem I had, that some had problems with their former temple presidents. Some even had problems with their guru. Some even had problems with Krishna. A lot of issues were father-mother issues, sibling issues from before they were devotees. So I was seeing the same thing that I was going through as a devotee, that same paradox in the lives of so many. And I was thinking, this is really interesting. That, I was thinking, what's going on here? We're chanting every day. These are good devotees. They're going to Mangalarti. Still, this is going on. And it was a big revelation to me. I mean, maybe it's obvious. I mean, in retrospect, it doesn't seem like such a big thing. But at that point, after 18 years of holding on to something and seeing devotees, God brothers, God sisters in the same situation, I realized this is pretty epidemic. And also, it just got me thinking about this whole world that we were talking about of alignment, head to heart. How is it that a movement which is based on understanding karma would have any resentment if we understand it's just my karma? And I realized, yeah, we understand it, but we don't understand it. So then that's, that article, Head to Heart, and all the stuff I've talked about with alignment and beliefs, it all just followed in the wake of this problem that we have a philosophy, we don't always live that well. And a lot of times we're not even aware that we don't live it that well. I never really thought about it until I gave up the resentment. Then I was like, wait a minute, 18 years? And I've been, when the resentment happened, I had been a devotee 16 years. I was 36. I've been devotee 16. So 16 years, you figure you would get it in 16 years, right? You'd finally understand karma and the whole thing. And I didn't. And I was seeing how this was kind of a pervasive problem everywhere. So that was, it really got me into this whole idea of we have to be living what we're learning. And so if you look at so many of my subsequent classes, that theme, it seems to come up all the time. This is how a devotee should be. You can't justify any other behavior. And then, well, I did service, so it's okay that I acted properly, or I had to act improperly to get this service done. No, that's passion and ignorance. Don't use those excuses. So, that's the hard work of Krishna consciousness. The service is easier, but being is harder than doing, right?
Very true. Yeah,
like they say in the corporate world, they say, the values are how you do it. The vision is why, the mission is practical, but this is how we're going to do it. But the values are the how is in what consciousness we do it. What's the culture in which we do it? And I thought, that needs more emphasis. The culture, we're always about, we have to do this. Okay, we know the mission. We're going to save the world with Krishna consciousness, and here's the practical ways we're going to do it. But what's the consciousness? Those are the values. And I think that was minimized. At least in my early years, it was minimized more. And that's where the culture comes in.
I think it's such an important point. We focus on doing, in achieving things, but the being part is missing. How we do it.
Yeah. Well, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu made a nice point. He said that being is also doing, because in the being, you're creating your relationship with Krishna. So that's what you're doing.
Correct.
You're chanting japa, you think, well, I'm not doing anything. No, you are. You're actually making your relationship with Krishna a little closer. So it's just a different kind of doing, which is more on the being level of doing, you could say.
Yeah, I heard that interview of yours with Chaitanya Chanamprabhu also. It was very good. A lot of very important points that was discussed there.
Yeah, similar to this, in many ways. I was last night, in regards to what we talked with Chaitanya Charan, last night, a devotee asked me, he said, well, we were talking about healing, traumas in your life that affect how you deal with your environment now and how you deal with people, how you deal with everything. And so the question came up, can chanting heal the traumas? And I said, well, you have to answer that, because if you're the one with the trauma and you're the one chanting, you should know the answer. So it's a very, it's a very general question. And, like, isn't the answer obvious? Well, does your trauma heal or not? And of course, the answer is subjective, because for some people it did heal, but maybe their trauma wasn't so great, or maybe their Krishna consciousness was greater. And maybe it was a trauma based on, I feel, unloved, and I became a devotee and I really felt my guru's love. And so it healed my trauma. So it could be, it's not that Krishna consciousness won't heal it. But I thought it was kind of like a question like saying, if I break my knee, can chanting japa to my knee heal it? And it's kind of like, well, it's not really, I can't say it couldn't heal it, but not really the purpose of japa, right? So I think in those questions of emotional healing, is that really the function of the holy name? It may happen mystically by the power of the holy name, but it may not, because it's not the primary function. So that's a whole interesting topic, isn't it?
Very true. Very true. It's 1.5 hours, but I have
we're finished.
I have so many questions actually.
Oh.
I think we should, if you agree, we can do one more session also.
Yeah.
There's so many things that
Why not?
there's so many things that we need to discuss.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for your time.
Before
we depart, Prabhuji, any last message, any ending conclusive message that you would like to give?
Yeah. I have a message that it's been coming out clearly since COVID. I've been giving class every day, and we've been reading from Prabhupada's books and letters, and what keeps coming out of these letters and books is Prabhupada is trying to just help us see things as they are, because Maya's position is to help us see things as they are not. And so I developed this, this just kind of attitude, which was a bit of a paraphrase of many things we read. If you want to be Krishna conscious, don't be stupid. That sounds like a crass way of saying it. I could say be intelligent. But for emphasis, I was saying don't be stupid, because all the stupid things we do keep us in Maya. And Prabhupada's giving us intelligence. He wants us to be smart. He wants us to act in a smart way. So if we just try to be smart and sincere, Krishna will reveal so many things to us. It's like so much of what we're talking about. A lot of it is things I've read, but a lot of it is things that Krishna just showed me in my attempt to learn more about how to be a better devotee. So, be intelligent and be sincere, and Krishna will help you understand all these things that we're talking about and much more.
Yes. Thank you very much, Guru. Very, very extremely grateful to you that you took your precious time to be with us. And
Hare Krishna.
It appears that I've just begun the whole session. There are so many things that I want to ask you, but we will definitely, with your permission, we will do one more session where we can get into more different things also. So once again, Prabhuji, very, very grateful to you for your wonderful association, for your precious association.
You're welcome. Oh yeah, I have a japa session now. I have to leave.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bala. Jai Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Wonderful.